All right, I want to take some time to understand how the electron cloud is structured. All right, so each of our atoms has a nucleus, and then if you venture further out into the electron cloud, you run into what's called energy levels. And our first energy level here is very close to the nucleus, at least compared to the other energy levels. And we call it like the first shell. And the electrons there have the lowest amount of energy. And that shell can hold 2 electrons maximum. And then if we go further out to the second shell, it has the ability to hold 8 electrons maximum. And then if we go into the third shell, at least for smaller atoms, it holds 8 electrons maximum. As the atoms get larger and larger, it doesn't necessarily, or actually can hold a little bit more than 8 electrons, but for our purposes, we're going to go 2, 8, 8. All right, so let's practice kind of drawing what that might look like. So got my periodic table, and we're first going to look up lithium. So lithium's right here, Li, and it has 3 electrons. So just for fun, I'll put 3p in here. And remember, our first shell can hold 2 electrons maximum. So it's going to hold 2e. And then our next shell can hold 8 electrons, but we're only doing 3 total. So I have 1 left over. So I would put that in my outer shell here. It's not filled, and that's a problem that we'll figure out later. So let's try another example. Nitrogen. So look at the periodic table. Nitrogen's got 7 electrons. Whoops. 7 electrons here. We know there's going to be 7 protons. Once again, there's 2 electrons maximum that go here. And then I have 5 left over. So 5 go in this second energy level. And that's it. And then let's go to another one, phosphorus. So phosphorus is P. It's actually going to have 15 protons and 15 electrons. So let's see how that works out. So I got my 15 protons right here. So 2 electrons in this first shell. And then, so we have 13 more electrons to distribute. So I'm going to put 8 electrons in the second shell. Remember, that can't hold more than 8. It can hold less than 8, but it can't hold more. So that gives us 10 total. And remember, we need to put in 15. So there are 5 electrons in that outer shell there. And that's phosphorus. Let's do one more. We got calcium here. Go look on my periodic table. Calcium has atomic number 20. So, whoops. So we got 20 protons. Now we had to distribute 20 electrons. So we start out 2, 8, that's 10 so far. We're going to put in another 8. That puts us at 18, 10 plus 8. And then we can go into the fourth shell, believe it or not, and add another 2. And and at a certain point, the that fourth shell will hold 8 max, and then that also changes. So I wanted to point your attention. So nitrogen and phosphorus, you see, they both have 5 electrons, in their outermost shell. And if you look at them on the periodic table, they're actually stacked on top of each other. And you'll also notice that they're in the 15th group, or 5A. And that's actually a nice little cheat. And what that tells us is everything in this column on the periodic table actually has 5 electrons in its outermost shell. All right. If you go to this here, this first, what we call a group, they all have 1 electron in their outermost shell. Okay. So group 1 all have 1. Group 2, they all have 2 electrons in their outermost shell. And don't believe me? Well, look at calcium here. This has 2 in the outermost shell. If if you were to look at beryllium, it has 4 electrons, so it has 2 in the first shell, 2 in the outermost. So all these have 2 in the outermost shell. All these have 1. We kind of skip this middle. They're called transition elements, and they act a little bit differently. But just so once we get to group 13 or 3A, they have 3 electrons in the outer shell. These have 4, 5, 6, 7, and then all of these in group 18 have like 8, with the exception of helium, which only has 2. All right, so that's kind of a nice little shortcut. These all have 1, 2, and like I said, skip the middle, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8, with the exception of helium, which has 2. The reason why helium is not in group 2 is because helium, it actually behaves like all of the other ones that have 8 electrons in their outer shell. Basically, all of these have their outer shell filled, because remember it goes 2 and then 8, 8. So chemically, helium behaves like all these other elements in this column. And by the way, the term for electrons in the outer shell that's called valence electrons. And then, like, your outer shell is your valence shell. If you have, so here you have two energy levels. So the second energy level is the valence shell. If you go to phosphorus, in this case, the third energy level is shell is the valence shell. We go to calcium. In this case, the fourth shell is the valence shell, and then the 2 electrons are the valence electrons. And hopefully that kind of helps you, gives or sheds some light on how to determine the structure of electrons, which will be useful when we're learning how to draw bonds.